So, when I talk about public transportation, like I said, the spine of any public transportation is always a railway. But when you talk about SDG goals, right, you're not specifically talking about any transit system. It is a goal that is at a macro level, at a 40,000 feet. So the relationship with those goals and how that goals can be pragmatically applied or come to fruition to attain those goals is what I'm trying to dissect today. Now, I do not know whether that is possible here, but is it possible to understand how many of you are um, specialized in public transportation or have exposure in public transportation? Is it possible for me to know? Is there a system that we know we can? Maybe
Sir,
show.
we can go through the chat window if they can type, sir.
All right. Okay. So I'm assuming that this is a mix of the people in the crowd, in the audience. There may be people who are much more well versed with what I'm speaking about. So please bear with me if I'm repeating stuff that you already know. So let's start with SDG goals, right? So SDG goal 11 talks about cities and urban conglomerates, urban settlements, right? So which are inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. That is. I mean, everybody knows that. But essentially, what that means is it has this three-pronged approach, which the entire sustainable goal is approached with, which has an effect on the society, has an effect on the economy, and it has an effect on the environment. Right? So, what does it mean? Is this an example of SDG 11? This is if you recognize this place. This is Dusseldorf in Germany, 20 years ago and now, right? So on the left you had this massive highway which was going through the promenade. This is a River Rhine promenade, and today it is a pedestrian path with a lot of parks and interesting spaces for the public. Is this part of SDG? Absolutely yes. Unfortunately, that is not the entire essence of SDG Goal 11, because this kind of intervention by urban planners and designers and architects are more of a rich man's problem. They were solving a rich man's problem or a developed country's problem. Good to see, but not applicable for a place like India. I'm not saying not applicable, but then when you consider other aspects of finance, etc., it may not be applicable for India, not yet, not at least now. We have a bigger problem. This is more like what we need to tackle, we need to address. And therefore, SDG 11.2 specifies scenarios like that. So SDG 11.2 is addressing countries or areas of the world, populations of the world, which have a huge divide between the haves and have-nots. So essentially it is meant for developing countries like us. And so this is essentially what it is. 11.2 of SDG goal is about safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport system. Now what that means is if you understand that from a practical point of view, there are two kinds of people. The people who have to do long commutes through congestions and generally miserable way of transporting themselves from one place to the other, versus a set of people who has very short, swift, and affordable kind of commute system. So this is the gap that SDG 11.2 is trying to bridge, and that is the key essence of this exercise. So what does it mean? What is that safe, accessible transportation system, environment-friendly transportation system? You must have seen this several times. This goes around in the social media a lot, and everybody understands this principle. So is it about reducing the number of vehicles on the road? Yes, but it is also no. The answer is no, not exactly that alone. This is the solution of engineers. What you see here is the solution of engineers, right? Or maybe it's a technology-driven, completely technology-driven solution. I mean, there is another line of thinking. Maybe if you give it to your automotive engineers, probably all of these 177 cars would be Tata Nexon or some sort of EV now, and then it would be considered as environment friendly by some. But that's not what we are aiming for, right? Essentially, what we are aiming for is that inverted pyramid of sustainable transportation system. Something that you already know, right? So this is what we are trying to achieve. So when we talk about a transportation system that is sustainable, green, we are talking about this, sort of. We are also talking about this, sort of, right? So we have our own systems here. This is from Ahmedabad. Please bear with me. The photographs are of poor quality. I just realized when I see it in the full screen, all taken from the web. And unfortunately, this is the quality I've got. Anyway, coming back to the topic, this is in Ahmedabad, the bus rapid system that is there. It is reasonably successful, is what I understand. But is this the best way to implement it? I think maybe not. So there is a gap in how an SDG goal is tried to be implemented in an Indian context, and how the details are lost. And that is where architects can step in. So I am convinced, with my experience that I have had with similar projects, I am convinced that this project, although on paper it met a lot of these goals, in reality it did not achieve what it could have achieved because of lack of designers and architects that should have been part of this. This is more or less, I mean, it looks like an engineer-driven project. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the case study of Bogota. Unfortunately, we are not a live audience where I can have that interaction. I'm assuming a lot of people know. Nevertheless, I thought that it would be a good thing to just take a look. I'm going to run a short video. I'm not going to keep it too long, maybe 3 minutes or 4 to 5 minutes. Bogota, if you didn't know, is a city in Colombia. It's one of the largest cities in Colombia, with I think about a million population, or 1.5 million population, and pretty much like the environment is pretty much like India. I mean, developing country, third world country, a lot of population congestion, no space in the roads, no space for expanding road systems, etc. All of that. I mean, very, very similar to what we have. Now take a look at what they have done, right?
At the end of September, I went down to Bogota, Colombia with Clarence Eckerson from Street Films, Carla Quintero from Transportation Alternatives, and actually Ethan Kent from Project for Public Spaces was along for the ride as well. We were taken around by Guillermo Gil Peñalosa, who is the brother of the former mayor, Enrique Peñalosa. And he gave us a great tour. We saw all of these incredible urban design innovations that the city of Bogota has been working on for the past dozen years or so. And it was really impressive. We got to take a look at that city's bus rapid transit system, which is called Transmilenio. About 10 years ago, when Enrique Peñalosa became mayor, there was a plan on the table to build a network of elevated highways all throughout the city of Bogota. It was incredibly expensive and multi-billion-dollar project. And Peñalosa and his administration looked at this project and said, this isn't going to do anything actually to solve our traffic congestion problem. It's going to create huge negative environmental impacts on the city as a whole. So Peñalosa decided to scrap that project and instead, for a fraction of the cost, replace it with what I think still today is probably the world's most advanced bus rapid transit system.
Tell us what is Transmilenio? Transmilenio is a bus rapid transit, an economical model specially developed to operate in Bogota in the main corridors, with the objective is to give a segregated lane, exclusive lane for big buses, in order to the people can move very quickly, but with 10 times less the cost of the traditional mass transit system in the world.
Some people call it surface subway. And you could kind of see why. It's buses on rubber wheels, you know, just like you'd see buses in New York. But what you see they've done is, like, in the middle of these busy multi-lane avenues, almost highways, they've taken away a couple lanes in the middle and they've built these stations. And next to the stations, you'll see usually 2 lanes of buses running on either side. You know, you have a lane for local bus traffic and for buses to pull into the station, and you have another lane for the express buses. The buses pull right up to the platform so that the floor of the bus is level with the floor of the station. So it's really easy for wheelchairs and you know, older people and people pushing strollers to get on and off the buses. I got to interview the CEO of the Transmilenio system, and she's someone who was there from the very beginning of the system and kind of worked her way up.
Before Transmilenio in 1998, one trip of 30 kilometers can be done in 47. We start doing some studies, 50 years trying to.
Buses themselves. How many buses are you guys controlling in here at
in a peak hour, like 1,000.
We have a sense of an average speed?
28 kilometers per hour in average. But we have lines of near road 40.
Wow. This central hub that we visited, you know, dispatches the buses. It follows them around the city in real time. They can communicate with drivers individually. You see a photo of the bus driver pop up on the controller's computer screen when he's getting ready to talk to that guy. You know, they if buses are starting to bunch or stack up together. Most of the Transmilenio system are these double long red buses, but traveling around through city neighborhoods, you see these much smaller green buses, and those are called feeder buses. And then what the feeder buses do is they travel through neighborhood streets and pick up people and take them to the bigger bus stations. One of the interesting things about the green feeder buses is that they're free. You don't pay for your Transmilenio ride until you get to the bigger bus station. That's one of the things that really speeds up the loading and the unloading, kind of like the subway in New York. You're paying for the bus in the station rather than.
Hello? So I hope you can hear me. Hello?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'm cutting that video. It's pretty long, maybe another 10 minutes to go. But then I wanted to cover a couple of things that they have done very well. So this is a perfect example of taking a technology which is considered to be degraded than a metro system, but then that is easily applicable in a scenario like Bogota, in a city like that, and apply with number of factors that we seem to be missing in projects that we implement in our part of the world, which is the seamless connection of seamless connectivity, the last mile connectivity, intermodal transfers. So these Bogota bus stations, so to speak, I mean, you realize that they are in the middle of the concourse, I mean, middle of the road. But the pedestrian flow is completely contained. It is managed extremely well. Connection points are provided, and at the connection points, you have other modes of transportation connecting to them. You have bicycles, you have green buses, which are the last mile connectivity buses, etc. And there is financial incentive of not charging for these feeder systems. So what I'm trying to say essentially is that in order to achieve the goals of sustainable development, it needs a whole lot more comprehensive approach. I mean, it needs a larger view, a micro view of the society that is required. And this is where I feel architects, people like us, become extremely important, because this is all about scale. I mean, that is why I say that from the macro to micro. I mean, the engineers and the planners and urban designers, they see it on a much higher level. They are seeing it at a scale of 1 in 40,000 or 1 in 10, 20,000, 1 in 10,000. But the moment you come down to 1 in 200 or 1 in 400, things start changing. I mean, a lot of things that you hadn't seen before, you hadn't considered before, start popping up. And one of the things that pop up very, very, very well are people, real people. I mean, they are not numbers, but they are real moving people with different characters and different cultures, etc. So this is the area where architects step in. So for me, when we talk about society and economy and environment, really we are talking about a sustainable transport system which connects society, economy, and environment. We are talking about people, places, and movement. That's what we do. That is our focus as architects, right? And all of this is dealt with. Architects deal with them under the strong umbrella or platform of sustainability. And sustainability comes in, we are responsible for financial sustainability, we are responsible for environmental, we're also responsible for asset sustainability. Unfortunately, also, I see that people tend, even in large projects, people tend, when they talk about sustainability, somehow it is related with green buildings. It is related with material finishes and solar gain and all of that. So, I mean, they are important. That is the fundamental of sustainable factors that can be applied for individual buildings. But as architects or transportation architects, our responsibilities do not end there. We need to consider other financial aspects and asset aspects, etc. And through the course of this this talk, I would try to explain what I mean by that. So the first point are people. We as a people, I mean, we are all different. We come with different physiques, different languages, different cultures, different backgrounds, different expectations. I mean, no two of us are the same. So the first point where a public transport system has a touch point with a design is with the people is where the architects would step in, and that therefore it becomes extremely important. So this is one of the starting points, right? So I'm sure that you understand the passenger demand forecast, which is the fundamental starting point of any transport system planning, which is definitely the forte of the urban designers and planners, and they come up with numbers like passengers per hour per direction. And then we take that number and start putting them into a micro scale and start looking at how these numbers are going to impact what we are going to build, what we are going to insert, what we are going to change in that ecosystem or the environment that we are about to change. So passengers per hour per direction becomes the common denominator where we start with, right? So I mean, to give you perspective, this could be very, very different. We have our Bombay Shivaji terminus, earlier called as Victoria Jubilee Terminus, which is one of the largest stations in India, carries, I believe, about 2.5 million people a day. Now compare that with Shinjuku Station in Tokyo, which is considered to be the largest or the most busiest station in the world. They cater to about 3.5, nearly 4 million people. 4 million people in a single day through one station, and that is multiple times of the population of some of the big towns that we know of, right? So the scale can be very, very different. So compare that with maybe Bangalore Metro or even Cochin Metro, where we are talking about maybe 4,000 people or 6,000 people, persons per hour. In a day. So the scale can be very different, but essentially that is your unit where you start with, right? So that is where you start putting things into place. So typically what I've seen is this is where the question arises: where do architects come in? At what point do architects come in into a project? Now, I'd like to sort of share a little my experience when I went to Singapore. So when I joined Land Transport Authority, Land Transport Authority has a legacy of having been, in the early days, from the British colonial days in Singapore, was the Public Works Department, and that eventually graduated and modified and evolved into what the Land Transport Authority it is today. But then also what that meant is it was a very engineer-driven organization. The decision makers, the people at the top, were all engineers. I started in the architecture department. We had a very strong architecture group, mostly British people who were working there at the time, but extremely efficient people. However, what I have found is it was always a tough call to make a decision in a project, because you have a massive, big team deciding on all aspects of a project, and it was engineer driven. And architects were mostly, at least in those days, considered as people who would decide the color of the station, or maybe the furniture that would go onto the platform, or the bollards that are on the walkway. I mean, we were, the interior designers to most of the engineers. That to me was very annoying. Of course, things have changed since, and I was able to make a lot of inroad when I went to Dubai, where Dubai was in a very nascent stage, and I was one of the 30 people who established that metro department in the government, and because of the level at which I joined, we were able to establish an equal say with architects and planners on the top, probably on the equal footing as an engineer, right? Why I am saying that is because the first touch point of any transportation project into a community is when you start inserting that infrastructure onto the ground. And the infrastructure that goes onto the ground is a decision that it's a function of several decisions. And one of the key decision factors is the technology that is chosen to be used. So the starting point of the problem would be you need to move 20,000 people in a direction per direction from point A to point B. This is the corridor that it should serve. So what is the mode of transportation? Should we consider metro? Should we consider light rail? Should we consider tram? Should we consider monorail? Should we consider bus rapid system? So all kinds of questions start coming in. And traditionally, this is the strength of the planner. But I am a huge advocate of this is where the architects can make a difference. No planner will be able to go into the detail of actually looking at how to insert an entrance into an existing road without affecting the coffee shop or the tea shop, which has been running there for 30 years, or without affecting that huge banyan tree, which is a local community space. I mean, so that kind of sensitivity, that kind of detail, that micro detail comes into play when architects are involved. I'm not saying that planners are not capable of doing that at all. Please do not misunderstand me. But then there is an element of sensitivity. There is an element of detailing that architects are able to bring in. And so that's the point where you come into the project and you make interesting scenarios. You open up as an architect or a designer, you start opening up interesting scenarios which may not have been considered before. For example, you could have a solution, you could have an architectural solution which could possibly bridge two diverse areas of the city and unify them, just like in the drawing today. I mean, the sketch that is shown on the screen now. So when you want to go into that kind of solutions, detailed solutions, certainly architects do have a better grip than people who look at it from a huge macro scale. And then, of course, before you make any major decisions, you start analyzing the impact of your structures or how you plan to intervene into that ecosystem, into the environment, and how your build structures are going to affect the pedestrian movement or the passenger movement or the vehicle traffic. Whatever, you start analyzing that, and you start massaging it and making it as smooth as possible. So I would cover this a little more in detail a little later in the project. This is also the time, I believe, the best time for interacting with the community, because as public transit architects, you are touching the human lives much more than anyone. And then you are interacting with community, you are interacting with the culture of the place, and you can make a positive impact. This is a project that I was involved in. It's called Hogan Station in Singapore. It's somewhere in the suburbs of the city. And what you see on the wall are actual handprints of the local residents. So 5 years before the project got off hand, went onto the ground, we established an art and transit project, and we started interacting with the local people. We involved them, the community participation in certain decision making of the projects where they were brought in. And as part of that exercise, what we did is we went on for a 6 month, I can't recall how long, but then a pretty long time, where we got rubber stamps of actual people on rubber molds, and later all of those molds were translated into concrete panels like what you see here. And it is very interesting. I mean, I used to live near this station for some time, and it was very interesting to see common people walking by and just trying to see, hey, is this my handprint? Because as a result of that, there is the sense of ownership of the local community towards that station is far high. So I'm just showing this as an example of what a little bit of architectural intervention can make a difference to the community in inserting a public transport system. Places. We all belong to places, right? We all have the roots of our identity are places where we come from, places where we studied, places we met our girlfriend or wife. The places has a huge impact on our lives. Therefore, we have, as designers and architects, we have a responsibility of how we intervene a public transit system into an environment. Some examples from around the world of how each of this has been built, and each of this has a statement. These are all statement pieces. Victoria Terminal was obviously a statement of colonial powers. It was a statement to show who they were. The project on this one, Serangoon Next, this was a project that I worked on. This was a suburban town in Singapore, where it was revitalized with a transit-oriented system, where the transit systems, including a bus interchange and a couple of metro lines, were superimposed with commercial and residential facilities, and it transformed the whole place. And of course, this is the Pune MRT system in our country, which is trying to establish a new language, a new sort of a paradigm in that environment, looking forward. So each of these public transit facility has a story to say, has something to tell to the world of why they are there and what they intend to do. You have extreme cases like the famous Santiago Calatrava station in New York. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with this. It's a massive statement. It is a bold statement, right? I mean, it is right next to the 9/11 memorial. You can't get bolder than that. I mean, there is nothing that goes understated in this project. On the other hand, you can go completely understated. So what you see on the top and the bottom is the same place. It's just the day and night. What you're seeing in the day is a pond, which reflects the National Museum of Singapore, which is a colonial building and a heritage building which had to be given its due importance in that environment. And there was a plan for a metro system right there under the road in front of it. And the government was very clear that the museum should not lose its luster. The museum had to have its importance. And this architectural solution is what you see below. So in the night you realize the pool is actually a glass-bottomed pool from where you can look into deep into the underground station right in front of the museum station. So this is respecting the environment, preserving or conserving that environment as it is and giving respect to that. So we saw two completely diametrically opposite ways that you can insert a project into an environment. But that's not all. I mean, these are art statements or architectural statements. But public transit projects are, very financially heavy projects. Some of them are so heavy that it may not be possible to be undertaken by a single entity or a single government. So all public transit projects do have I'm sure you know this, but I'd like to reiterate, do have a due process of evaluation of what sort of funding it should have, what sort of effect that project is going to have in the society, with its people, with the place. So this is the simple flow diagram that they use, where we call that effects, right? So effects of infrastructure investment. So, if for those who may not familiar with this, I can just say the project effects are also known as flow effects and the facility effects. What it means is when you have any project would have two kinds of effects for sure. So the project effect and the facility effect. So project effect is the effect of the funding that is pumped into the project while it is undergoing construction. So this is what happens when you start buying building materials, transporting things, giving employment for local people for work in the project, the construction project, all of that. That is the project effect. But that stops the moment the construction is over. What happens next is what you call as this facility effects. So this is pretty much the asset or stock market, when we call the asset effects in our stock exchanges, pretty much the same, because this is this is the effect of an investment that has already been made, and then it has some outcome from it. So you have external effects and internal effects, etc. I'm not going into the details, but essentially what it talks about, say for example, we talk about user effects. User effects is something that can be valued by the time that has been reduced for a commuter in commuting the same distance before and after the project. And that has a value, and that value is multiplied by millions of people who are using that to become part of the economy of the city or the state or the country. So that's the user effect, right? So monetary external effects are things like when you put in a project, what would be the appreciation of the land around that? What would be the new commercial ventures that would come as feeding of this project, etc. So what I'm saying here is all of this, there is a bearing on what architects can do or should do or would do. All of this has an effect on what we can control or manipulate or contribute to. Best example for that is transit-oriented developments, right? So this is a success story in all parts of the world. This is a cross section of transit-oriented development. It's of course it's a conceptual scheme in Jakarta, Indonesia. where the metro system comes in, and there is a residential system, residential complex and commercial complex all coming together and utilizing the open space on the top to create green spaces for the city and enhancing the quality of life there. So transit-oriented development, in my opinion, are the ones that we should be looking at every urban environment in India, particularly in India where we have high densities of population and very land is scarce, and we need that kind of revitalization in more cities. One country that has taken this to almost level of perfection is Hong Kong. It's not a country anymore, by the way. So this is, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but this is the famous Kowloon Tower in Hong Kong Bay, in Kowloon, overlooking Hong Kong Bay. This is one of the best transit-oriented projects that I think ever has existed. So you look at the number of levels that are going under. You have the MTR, or the local metro, that is in the lowest basement, and then on top of it you have an airport express line. Brilliant. The user experience is awesome. I mean, I have traveled from here. It was a seamless experience of arriving in a taxi, taking my luggage down the escalator into the basement, checking in at the metro station, leaving my baggage, getting my boarding pass at the train counter, station counter, the ticketing counter, getting into the metro, reaching the airport, getting into the plane, reaching Singapore, and getting my bag that I had checked in at the station from the belt in Singapore airport. So seamless transfer, seamless modes, interconnecting several modes of transportation. It is also right next to the water transportation. So this is one of the success stories that we have seen in the world of transit. I'm sure there are several others. Even in India, we have several others. But in terms of having perfected it to near perfection, this project, in my mind, goes up right up in the list. So then again, we have these environmental factors. And when we talk about environmental factors, we have lots of, everybody wants to have a green project. So the green projects can be like the one in the left, which is from Guangzhou, China. It's considered to be a green project, but that's pretty much a tick in the box, right? I mean, they basically take a checklist of a BREEAM or whatever, green environment checklist that they're following, and they have just basically checked every box in there. We also have very innovative projects, like the one this is right next in our country. It's Nagpur, where the canopies that you see here are quite an innovation. It captures the rainwater and also has solar panels to give light at the bottom. So even that small little innovation has a difference. It makes a difference to the environment and also increases the quality of life there. So there is no limit to applying environmental factors to a project, not just by choosing the right material. And so there are several things that you can consider. Another example, I'm going back to the same project, which is one of my favorite ones. It's the same project that I mentioned before, Museum Station in Singapore. That's the water body that I talked about. But that water body essentially is a skylight of the station below. And by this very innovative way, they have brought in skylight, the daylight, deep into the station. And if I remember correctly, that station is about 40 meters deep. It has brought in sunlight straight into the station with very little thermal gain. Innovation at its best, if you ask me, in applying environmental criteria in designing it in a station. The other important aspect, which I have a personal peeve, and I believe this is something that all academics should give a little more attention in India. Certainly my professors, when I was a student, or at least my curriculum did not provide that kind of impetus on this topic, which is sustainability of assets. That's a fancy way of saying thinking of maintenance. Maintenance is something which I'm not sure how it is now, but at least when I was a student and when I was practicing here, certainly maintenance was never something that figured very high in the scheme of things in an architectural design project. So for me, it was a new experience when I went there and found that if you're designing fancy spaces as a designer, if you're putting 3-story high spaces or 2-story high spaces, or you have those fancy materials that you've decided to choose for your project for whatever reason, it is also your responsibility to ensure that this has a good life cycle. This has a good maintainability, and it can be maintained with minimal intervention or regular intervention, and it is an architect's responsibility to give that maintenance regime or program as part of the project design. Something which I have never seen, at least 10 years ago, 20 years ago here. So you have these nice architectural finishes. This is one of the stadium stations in Singapore, again, one of the projects I was involved in. But every part of this design, every part of not just the finishes, but including the equipments, etc., has a very clear maintenance regime which goes into life cycle management of that asset, and that is where the asset sustainability comes. To give you an idea, the method that how you approach asset sustainability is very different in different places. The earlier or in places where you don't have a maintenance regime, typically the blue line goes, right? So where something works and it without maintenance it keeps going, and then at some point it breaks down, and then you repair it. You have a certain cost there, and then the cycle repeats. Whereas the method that we should be following is a long life method, so where there is a clear maintenance regime, and that carries through with minimal cost to the exchequer or the public funding. So this is one of the things that are missing in our system of things here. Movement. The most important aspect of a public transit system. Moving people, moving traffic from point A to point B. And it is all about numbers. In my opinion, one of the key or the prime metric that should define a transit project is a level of service. For those of you who are not familiar with a level of service, this is a metric that was developed by Joseph Ruin almost 60 years ago, I think, or maybe 8 years ago. This was first adapted as a metric by the London Underground as a standard for ensuring quality of service provided to a public transit system. So to give you an idea, so it's basically the level of service is divided in 6 categories, A to F, and as you can see in the figure, level of service A is when you have the freedom in a defined space to move in any direction that you want. There is nothing to hold you back. You can move at the speed you want. You can change directions in the way you want. Nothing to stop you. That is complete free circulation. Level of service B, a certain direction is restricted. Level of service C, maybe more than one direction is restricted, and so on and so forth. And by the time you reach level of service F, you can see that practically it becomes impossible to move at your volition. It becomes difficult for you to move the way you want it. You would rather be led by the crowd. And that is the same metric typically used by both traffic planners, urban designers, and also architects. It is practically the same thing, right? So in case of pedestrians, in case of public transit system, you look at pedestrian flow or density. If you're talking about a a rolling stock or a bus or a train or a tram, you're talking about density. If you're talking about a movement, if it's a pedestrian path or a corridor or whatever, then you talk about the flow rate. But essentially, the principle is the same. In many parts of the world, including the metro systems or the public transit systems that I was part of, if you reach level of D, level of service D, then things have to be changed. There is a panic button starts becoming active. I mean, there are very clear intervention that the authorities or the operators would need to put in place to bring back the level of service, to increase the level of service to the front. If it reaches F, practically everything stops. Both in Singapore and Dubai, if a level of service F is reached in a metro station or any public transit system, the public transit system is shut off, at least for temporarily. And that's because it has a potential to become a risk to life. Stampedes can occur. So when you reach level of service F, everything stops. Now, how do you tackle this? How do you design this into architectural projects? Today, unlike 20 years ago when I started into this domain, there are a lot more tools available. The computing powers have gone, the simulation processes powers have gone high, and then you can practically come up with any kind of simulation. In the good old days, what we used to do was work on pure density, square meter density calculated by formulae manually. But now you have simulation software where you can actually determine the kinds of personalities, the personas, the avatars that is introduced into a system. So you can design a public transit system or a public space. It doesn't have to be a transport system. It can be the same software can work in the case of a stadium or any public gathering for that matter. The interesting fact is this public pedestrian simulation software or engineering got an impetus. It started developing at a fast pace after a massive tragedy. This is quite a long time ago, 1987, in a county called Hillsborough in UK. There was a stampede in a football stadium where 97 people lost their lives. Now, it was a simple thing. It was just a brawl or a fight between two people. Somehow the stampede happened and people started trying to get out of the stadium. Everybody reached the doorway at the same time, and a bottleneck happened and people were crushed to death. The government took a study and they tried to find different means of fixing it, and the obvious solution at the time was, okay, let's make the doorway wider. So you have now a 2.5 meter wide doorway, let's make it 4 meters. But then at a cost of maybe £1 million. But when they simulated with design solutions in a software, they were astonished, they're surprised to see that the whole flow can be regulated by the introduction of a few simple bollards. Just a few bollards, just like how you have these attenuators inside an air-conditioned duct. That solved the problem. So instead of spending £1 million, you could spend a few tens of thousands of pounds, and then you can get the same effect and much faster way. So that was the beginning of pedestrian software or pedestrian simulation software that was introduced into any project that had massive movements of people. I was responsible for introducing this as a mandatory requirement in any transit project in Dubai. It is written, it's made into a law that if you're having a massive public transit system in Dubai, it has to undergo a pedestrian software simulation. It has huge impacts on saving costs, in enhancing user experience, and so on and so forth. So can we take care of this? This is what we have. Is it impossible for us? Absolutely not. It is just a matter of applying the right principles, looking at details, and introducing solutions that are sustainable. So to give you an idea, I'll show you a 1-minute video. This is definitely not a promotion for this software. By the way, this software is called Mass Motion, which is at the moment quite the world leader. There are several other softwares available as well. This is one of them. But for those people who may not have seen how simulation software work, I'd like to take 1 minute of your time and show you that.
In this video, mass motion is being used to simulate the evacuation of a busy subway station. Each person is coloured according to where they originate in the environment. Mass motion uses a sophisticated navigation system that enables the people in the model to avoid each other and obstacles while finding their way toward their goal. This route finding is based on the automatic extraction of the pedestrian network from 3D geometry. The people will continue to monitor their progress towards their goal, making route adjustments as necessary until they've reached their exit.
Right. So you get an idea, right? I mean, that's a very, very short video. But then you understand that how spaces can be planned.
I love driving in this electric vehicle, feeling morally superior.
Chinese brands will take up a significant portion of global electric vehicle sales.
The single biggest technological change, probably since the time we did.
Sorry about that. So we're almost done. So essentially what I'm saying is, it makes interesting, as architects we can make interesting inroads into the design projects that we undertake as public transit architects, right? So talking about this pedestrian simulation, back in Dubai, when we were developing the Airport Express line, and I was also leading the committee to fix the standards of design and planning for railway projects in Dubai. One of the things that was very interesting is something as simple as the pedestrian speed of walking, right? So the simulation software assumes, of course, you can introduce a speed that you want. So it is assumed that standard speed of pedestrian in a public facility is considered to be 38 meters per minute, which is more or less there. But then when you look at different cultures, it becomes very interesting, because one of the things that I have noticed in Dubai, in the Middle East, is that there is a huge gender demarcation, right? So the men walk together, the women walk together separately. The men has a different speed, the women have a different speed. Both of them have a different speed to the rest of the population because of the kind of clothes they wear. Things like that. I mean, even if you introduce, imagine in this crowd of people, if you introduce a person in a wheelchair or a geriatric person whose mobility is very reduced, what would happen to that movement, to the movement of the crowd? Will that person be pushed aside and people start moving away, or will there be enough space for people to move around her? All those things can be simulated in the pedestrian. So the details to which we can go, to the micro level to which we can go, is incredible as architects, and that makes a huge difference to the user experience in any public transit system. So when you talk about public transit system, there is a certain journey that you have. It is all about architects coming to public transit architecture, public transit systems at the point where people change modes of transfer. So every time there is an intermodal transfer, there is a role for the architect to play. The moment a pedestrian gets onto a bike, there is a need for an architect. There is a design need to understand where the bikes are parked, how it is taken, introduced into the public, all of that. When the moment the bicyclists change into a train, there is a design need. When a bus, a passenger from a bus interchanges into a taxi, a design is required. So everywhere there is an intermodal transfer that happens. Architects have a role to play, and good design have a role to play. You need to consider the cases of not just the able-bodied. In fact, one of the dictums that in public transit architecture is that a fantastic, a brilliant design is one that feels completely intuitive with minimal signage or supporting systems. You should arrive at a place, at a place of public transit facility. You should be able to orient yourself by yourself intuitively. You should understand the aspects of your journey. You should have the ability to choose the mode of journey, do the ticketing, do the money transfer, all of that, and be on your own without minimal support, with minimal support. So a completely intuitive, completely 100% intuitive project may not be the ideal, because you always have a certain significant number of people who have who have special needs, people who are aged, people who have physical disabilities, people who are pregnant, people who are traveling with kids. So there is a percentage of our crowd which do not have the same ability as we do, and therefore we have to approach the public transit architecture design in a way that we cater to them as well. So it's not about 100% intuitive design, it is about an intuitive design with some support. So this is a famous dictum, right? Good design is good business, but I would modify that and say good design is good for society, economy, and environment. And that is our sustainable goal number 11. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a very knowledgeable session. That was really indeed a very knowing aspect for all of us. That is the need of the time. Thank you so much. I would now like to request all of you to come up with your questions. Any questions, if anybody have, you can unmute yourselves and ask the questions.
Hello?
Hello. Ashwin, good evening. It's regarding the Ahmedabad project. Hello.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you may have to speak a little loud because it's raining cats and dogs here. I am struggling to hear. I'm so sorry about that. Could you speak up, please?
Yes, it's regarding Ahmedabad transport system there. And I found it, I had been there and I found it very well designed, and the roads were very effective and efficient. There was a little bit of crowding on the sides. The transport was crowded on the sides, but the central lane and the bus lane, when it is free of hindrance, it is avoiding so much of the problem that we face in Bangalore. So it makes it much more energy efficient that way, is the point I have. And the next is regarding sustainability aspect and converting it into green zones later, when the people of Ahmedabad can afford it. That is a more easy possibility out there. Whereas that is not even thought of in places like Bangalore, where the elevated highways are taking its place and trees are completely being felled for it. So this is the scenario we face here when compared to what is happening in Ahmedabad. In Ahmedabad, on the other hand, the crossing of pedestrians is also possible, The next is, it is also possible for people to sit relaxed in the bus stand for a greater period of time. So all these are much more catered to in Ahmedabad. So I think that is that is a model for a more sustainable facility, according to me. What is your view on that?
So Benny, couple of things there. One, I'm not familiar with Ahmedabad project, although I have seen pictures and read some articles, but it is very hard to judge based on just pictures, right? I mean, we as designers, we should rely on numbers. We have to look at data. It's a data-driven effort for sure. So perhaps Ahmedabad has achieved that kind of efficiency. I'm not sure, maybe it has. But just looking at the pictures, I'm also able to see that the intervention of facilities is not seamless as it could have been. I'm not saying it is not seamless, but it could have been better. And it is not a function. So sometimes when I talk about this here amongst some of my peers, the common comment that comes up is, we are a developing country, we are a third world country. Trust me, it is not about money. Money is required, but money is not everything. It is about applying out of the box thinking sometimes. It is about applying, it's pure common sense to start with. I'll give you another a great example. Right in our country where it went completely kaput. I mean, there was this, I don't remember the years, but at least 40 years ago or something, that Delhi had a circular railway system, right? I mean, I believe that was originally built as a carriage goods kind of track. When somebody decided that could be a circular railway system which would take away congestion from the central Delhi. Theoretically, it sounded okay. I mean, everybody went after it. That project was actually implemented, and it ran for a while. I don't know for how long, and I think it is completely transformed, and it is not used at all in terms of ridership. The reason why it did not succeed was very simple, and it is just no rocket science. It is just common sense, because there was no last mile connectivity there. You had a circular system which theoretically would collect people and take them around, but how do you collect people? How do you reach there? As an urban planner, how do you get people from their doorstep to their office or back to their doorstep into a public transit system? So where the Delhi circular system failed, Delhi Metro succeeded, and that's because it was inserted very well. It was introduced into the urban fabric, considering all aspects, right? And it became a success. So I'm not sure about Ahmedabad, but I also know that Ahmedabad is one of the cities in the world which has the slowest traffic, so to speak. But then again, my information could be a little outdated, but at least it used to be. Maybe things have changed. If it has, then it is good. You're absolutely right about Bangalore, though. The intervention of the metro system as a spine or the major transit system into the city has not been achieved fully. The efficacy have not been achieved because the intervention in local areas are not complete, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, we have a question. How at the last mile connectivity and rail transit, at the rate last mile connectivity and rail transit?
I'm not sure what the question means.
Kalpana ma'am, can you please can you make the question more clear, please?
Hello, sir. The projects that you have marked out or you have shown through your presentation, how is the last user, the last mile, that is pedestrians, been thought over?
Thank you, Kalpana, right? Thank you, Kalpana. So I was referring to a number of projects out there, but then I could speak in the context of either Singapore Metro or Dubai Metro, both of which I was part of. The last mile connectivity is pretty well thought of, right? Last mile connectivity would be from the metro station, the metro or the railway being the spine, the heaviest people mover system. From there, you get into a within the transit system itself, within the transit station itself, you can change your mode of transport either to a bus or a tram or a people mover, or easy seamless transfer to a taxi, or your own private car. Although in Singapore, private cars are completely controlled. It is very hard to own a private car in Singapore. You don't need it. For the same reason, the public transit system is pretty high. The aim of the government is by 2030 to have a public transit facility every 400 meters. Whichever direction you walk, you will have a public transit facility. That could be a bus, it could be a tram, it could be a people mover, it could be a metro, or it could be a taxi stand. It doesn't matter what, but you will be able to be inserted into the public transit system at that point, every 400 meters. And to reach that insertion point, you have dedicated bike paths and pedestrian paths, and sometimes covered walkways, etc. So that kind of detail has gone into some of the evolved mature metros or transit systems in the world. The other thing that I'd like to talk about at this point is the world is moving fast, right? I mean, the technology is taking over everything, right? So I don't know whether you've heard of the term called MaaS, mobility as a service. Everybody should know SaaS, right? SAS, software as a service. That is, I'm sure, everyone in this generation would know. But now the new system is mobility as a service. Now, what they mean is mobility is imagine everything happens in your mobile phone, in your mobile device. Your ticket is in your mobile device. Your direction, your trip planner is in your mobile device. If you are a person with special needs, or maybe you have a hearing, if you're hearing impaired, if you're visually impaired, you have applications in your mobile device which will help you plan your trip, meaning how do I go from here to point B, from point A to point B. Okay, I need to take a bus, I need to walk from here 10 meters and I'll reach this bus stop, and then you need to take bus number 21 and then you need to get off at this bus stop and transfer to this metro, take this metro line, and I will reach there. So that kind of, and you don't have to stop at a ticketing point to actually do your money exchange. Everything is automatically deducted, and it's seamless transfer. Once you are in a system, it is the same. It doesn't matter what mode of transportation you're using. So that kind of technology is coming in many places. It has already come in Finland, in Copenhagen, for example. They have introduced a MaaS as a major boost for their system. In Singapore, I remember 10 years ago we were toying with the idea of chips implanted in people's. This is futuristic, right? But then that was seriously considered. I mean, Singapore is such, they always consider most futuristic and ridiculous things people would think are ridiculous now, but will become the norm in future. So they were thinking of having chips implanted in your hand, so that when you just walk into a public transit system, everything is deducted automatically. So the last mile connectivity, but then also at the same note, I would like to say that you don't have to go into that kind of high expensive technology either. It's just a matter of catering for the most onerous citizens of our community, right? The most disabled people of our community, ensuring that they will be able to wheel their wheelchair without obstruction from their home to the bus stop, and they will be able to get into the bus without, without difficulty. They know they'll be able to understand, their trip and in their journey, etc. So it's just a matter of detailing.
Sir,
Yes,
the next question.
Hello.
Sorry, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am.
May I Thank you. Actually, I had raised a hand for the same question as you have explained just now. Like our Prime Minister has also declared, it could be a single card and you can use any mode of transport. So that way it could be like we used to have pass for the bus for the same, if you are going on the same route, you can have a pass. Like this, it can be a card and you can use n number of modes possible for reaching your destination. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, it is high time. It's high time we did that. I remember using 25 years in London, in London, and in Hong Kong. I mean, I was amazed. I mean, 20 years later, we are thinking about it. But better, late than never.
One more thing, sir. You have said about the feeder vehicles, feeder buses, green buses. About that. How about the trams being replacing those feeder buses? Because they are the slow vehicles and they can reach into the residential zones, the neighborhood areas.
So the difference between buses and trams is very drastic, because trams are what we call as guided way systems, right? So the trams fall under the guided way systems, railway fall under the guided way systems. Bus rapid systems fall under guided way systems, meaning all these vehicles move in a dedicated right of way. So if you are considering a dedicated right of way system, then you have restrictions, then you have certain needs, then you have certain interchanges, crossovers required, etc. So when you go into the smaller areas, it becomes very difficult for guided way systems to be in place. So you may be able to introduce trams in certain sectors. It is the decision to choose a technology of what is applicable or appropriate for a certain space or a geography. It has a number of factors. It is not a simple question. It has to be considered in detail, in depth. So there must be a reason why they have chosen for buses rather than trams.
In our case in India, we also have unorganized sector. So people using rickshaws, the poor class, they are working as a rickshaw puller. So that is the source of income for them, source of employment for them. So in this case, if we provide the organized way of public transit, then how about the future of this sector?
So development, I am sure that my time is limited now, but I'll quickly answer this. Development is always at the cost of something, right? So, we have a lot of sewage workers even now in India. People who actually have to go into the sewer pits and remove, the sewage manually. And there is a nationwide effort to make this mechanized, automated. So what happens to these people? What happens to the tens of thousands of people for generations? Because I believe this is like almost a ostracized community in our country, unfortunately. But then for generations, they have been doing the same thing. So what happens to them? That's a question. The question is simple. They are reskilled to use these automated machines. So there are a number of ways you can think about. I mean, one method is to empower these rickshaw pullers. Maybe you can provide facilities that they can actually have this rickshaw pulled, even continue to have them if their city or the environment allows, or if not, they can be reskilled, or they can be taken into the transit system and reskilled to be useful in some other way. So there are many ways.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the next question is, what is your suggestion to Bangalore for public transport lanes?
I'm sure I am not capable to answer that question because it is not a simple thing. Any transit project has to be evaluated very well. I don't live in Bangalore, although I do have a place there. I come and go, so the maximum number of days I spend there is about 2 or 3, and metro rides are very seldom. So I am not the right person. The suggestion would be, if at all it has to be studied, I have to be a commuter, I need to understand the system very well. But then one blanket statement that I have is, see, the thing about public transit systems is all about one thing and one thing only, and that is called the political will. If there is a political will, all of these would work. And my only suggestion, and not just for Bangalore, but as a whole to how things are done in India, to some extent, I think Delhi Metro has sort of circumvented that problem by taking on a lot of this together, is by intra-departmental coordinated effort, right? So whoever is developing a public transit system should be responsible either in their own individual capacity as a company or organization, or as a coordinated, special vehicle body where they bring in other actors or players in the government, in the private space and the public space, but they should be a consolidated group of people who have a collective direction to address the public transit system as a whole, right from the last mile connectivity, from the moment somebody steps out from his door, his house door, to the destination that he goes. That entire system has to seen in a totality. What I feel is missing in India is that departments don't work together. The domiciles are very different, and people don't cross each other's domain, and that is where we fail, in my opinion. But that's very generic. It's not specific to Bangalore Metro alone.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, could you please explain about the congestion analysis procedure?
Congestion analysis, are you referring to the slide that I showed? Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Hello? I can't hear you, sorry.
Yes, so it's in reference to one of the slides you had shown earlier.
Okay, so the question is to explain a little more? Is that what is expected?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just conceptually, like just to kind of understand what is the
Okay.
basis of that.
I can do that, but I'm also mindful of the time, and I believe the time that given to me is over. So I don't know, I can do that if you want, but it's up to you.
Yeah, so whatever is convenient. I mean, maybe you can mail us. I don't know really.
Well, one thing I can, I don't know what to mail, but one thing I can do is, I can engage with anyone who really wants to understand this one-on-one on my, I can do that. I can explain it without taking, the next speaker's time.
I guess the host, I think the host college can probably take this initiative because it will be really helpful for all the participants here. If we can, kind of understand this aspect, because
I can do that.
we really don't, we don't use any kind of simulations or any kind of software as such. So
sure. Yeah, I'm open. I can do that. You let me know. We can coordinate and have a separate session for that.
We'll make efforts from our side for that. Thank you. We can make efforts to send in the answers for that to the individual person who talks. And right now, Anjali, I will make my effort for that. Thank you.
Can we move forward to the next question, sir?
Yeah, sure. I mean, aren't we over? So I'm keeping quiet because the time is over.
No, sir, but the questions are there, so I think that should be answered shortly. So
Sure.
we'll take
I
all
mean,
the questions.
so,
Yes, sir.
okay. I mean,
We'll take all the questions, sir.
if you're giving me time, then I can go back to the screen, slide and.
I think, sir, that explanation can be given to the individual person
Okay.
for whom like it is at most required.
Okay.
I think at a later date it should be fine.
Okay. So what is the next question?
So the next question is, in Indian context, it is so much required that any mobility infrastructure project also includes some kind of economic opportunities for integrating informal segment. So what aspect is that in terms of project formulation?
I think it's the answer to the question is the same as the one that I gave a little while ago about the rickshaw pullers, where this is not exclusive to India. It is pretty much everywhere, but definitely in all developing countries where any legacy systems that exist will have a certain amount of informal economy that is around it, no doubt about it. And India is the same, right? And so the moment you intervene, and that's why I use the word intervention, right? So the moment you intervene into that community, into that society, into that economy with a public transit system, you're going to upset that. So a successful public transit system will address that. We'll have to have solutions for it. We'll have to have reparations, or either reparations or alternatives, or that needs to be part of the solution. So there is no one size fit all solution for any project. Each and every project has to be addressed in its own merit, its own right. So the solutions also could be very different. It has cultural impact. It has geographical impact. A lot of this thing as well. So collectively speaking, when a project is formed, is designed or planned, as part of the economic sustainability, that is the SDG goal, right? Economic sustainability efforts, these aspects are considered and have to be provided for.
Thank you, sir. I request all of you to please switch on your cameras for the screenshot. Thank you so much, all of you.